Welcome to the Generative Age,
a podcast that explores the rapidly evolving world of generative AI and its impact on education.
Guided by EdTech Director, author, and NYSCAPE board member Alana Winnick. We are joined by experts and practitioners in the field who are shaping discourse of artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Whether you're an educator, administrator, technology leader, or simply interested in the future of education, join us on this journey through the Generative Age, powered by NYSCAPE.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We are really excited to be back live since ISTE, where we had the great podcast with Carl Hooker. And we have a great lineup for this fall. And to kick us off tonight is our special guest, John Spencer. And John comes to us from George Fox University. And John, there's a lot of hype around about you. I don't know if you know that or not, but we're really excited to not just listen to what you want to share with us, but also to engage in great discussion. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Alana for facilitating, as always.
Thank you, Amy.
Glad to be here, yeah.
For everyone that's here live, we're going to use a chat, and just let us know if you've tried something with generative AI since our last session, and any questions for John. We're going to have some time at the end. We're going to be using all of your comments and questions to guide our future sessions. So if we don't answer them this time, we'll make sure that we get to them in a future episode. So we'd like to welcome John Spencer. So John is an author. You've written, is this 5 books now, John?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Like
more.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
It's 5 or?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Actually, I think it's like maybe 7.
7. Wow. I looked at your website and there was actually only 4. Your newest one wasn't on there when I looked. So maybe is it not on there still? You got to get that on.
I need to update that. I need to add that.
Yeah. So 7 books. That's really impressive. I do have questions for you about the books in a second. He's also a speaker. If you've never heard him, he does keynotes, and he's a podcaster of, let's do a little throwback, classroom questions with
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What happened with that?
Oh yeah. That was the first podcast. Yeah. Wow. That was that's how AJ and I became really good friends. Like we had been I guess collaborating back and forth on like Genius Hour stuff and design thinking stuff. And then doing that. Yeah, that is a throwback. We became good friends through that podcast.
You know what else I learned today? So I like to ask, so AJ was a former guest, and I like to ask for Easter eggs to throw at my upcoming guests. I learned a fun fact today about you. You and AJ had never met in real life when you co-authored the book together. You never met.
Yeah, we hadn't met in person yet. No.
What was that like to write a book with someone that you never met? Yeah,
it's weird. Like you just know people online, and a lot of, collaborating with all kinds of tech tools, like if our preps aligned, we would collaborate. And then it was like, using tools like Voxer and just chat. And it was kind of wild. And then eventually we ran into each other a few times and hung out.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I assumed you guys knew each other really well. That was a fun, interesting fact for me. Okay, so back to his current podcast right now is called The Creative Classroom. And I actually listened to all of them as I was prepping for this show with you. And I thought it was so interesting. Your most recent guest was actually one of our NYSCAPE's own, Christina Halsweiss, who won the NYSCAPE Teacher of the Year award. So that was really fun fact for me that she was your most recent guest.
She was. I really enjoyed that interview. That was fun.
She's amazing. She's a former board member, and she actually just reached out over the weekend about having a library media specialist strand at our annual event, just to make sure that everybody sees the connections, because although it's very evident for all of us, it's not across the board. So yeah, Christine is fabulous.
She was great. Well, and that's part of what's wild about podcasts is I'm sure you're dealing with this right now doing this podcast, is you run into so many different people that you would never get to meet, right? Like, so one podcast episode, I'm talking to her, another podcast episode, I get to talk to, Sal Khan, right? Like it's just,
that was incredible. How did you land that? That's like a dream. I haven't even tried, but that was wild.
He has like a publicist, and they reached out to me, and I was like, that sounds great. Like, of course, the answer is yes. And that's a bizarre thing. Like sometimes you'll ask someone and then they can't, and then other people are able to that you would never think. And so it's just serendipitous.
I referenced his TED Talk in my book. That's how much it really resonated with me.
I felt like I loved his TED Talk,
Me too.
and I really appreciated in just talking to him how informed he is, how nuanced he is, how much of the work he's actually done of listening to K-12 educators. Um, that was really refreshing.
Yeah, I really like that. And you did a great job interviewing him. Maybe you'll have some interview tips for me later. I'm always open to constructive feedback and suggestions.
Oh, thanks.
Um, so next, so he's a blogger. I subscribe to your newsletter. I think it's really informative. I really enjoy it. So if you don't subscribe to his newsletter, I highly encourage you to do so. And you're also a professor, so you teach pre-service teachers, correct? Is that what you?
Yeah.
What topics do you teach?
Well, I was hired with a specialty in ed tech, but really I teach all kinds of classes. And that's part of what's fun is, if you do a workshop or a keynote, it'll often be on blogs that you've, written and it's books that you've written and things like that. And I have just really enjoyed, like, yes, I'll teach a class that's project based and focused on ed tech, but then, I get to teach a classroom management course, right? And just and it's fun to just be like, this is not my big area of expertise. Let's talk through these things together. And I love getting to get in and observe teacher candidates and be in classrooms and watch the changes in culture and context and technology and all those things happen kind of firsthand with people who are new teachers that you've built a relationship with.
That's really awesome. And then the last one, I love this one. You're a maker and you encourage people to be makers. And that's a lot of the reason why you're here. And I tried to make a lot of the conversation around this idea of being a maker. We're going to dive in. So I linked, I guess, only 5 of your 7 books here because that's all that was on your website. And the AI one was not on there. So I added that as.
You need to add that. You're right.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about that before we dive in. So you just published this like 2 weeks ago or something?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been out for about 2 weeks.
Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, the bizarre thing is I first got into generative AI when I saw it modeled for me a few years ago. And it was in the context of assessment. And then the big question of what does that mean for personalized learning? So it was really focused on that. And I just had this moment of like, I failed the Turing test. Like I couldn't tell the difference between what was human and what was AI generated. And I was not like someone who got excited about AI initially. I saw it and was scared. Right?
Why were you scared?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I didn't like, it felt like to me, the most human aspects of what we get to do that machines don't do is creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't worried about cheating. I was worried about 2 things. One was, what does this mean for creativity? And then the second that I was worried about is like, what does all this mean for deep fakes and information literacy and that? And that second area is still something I get concerned about. But then I got excited about it, especially as I began to talk to people that were real experts on computer science and engineering and areas like that, and recognized, oh, there's a lot that it can do that are the tedious elements of creative work.
Right.
And I got really excited about the notion of like, what does it mean to be human-centered, but use and amplify AI wisely and ethically and things like that. And so I just was on a journey for a few years of just interviewing anyone I could. I regret the fact that a lot of people I interviewed, I didn't even record like a podcast episode because I was like, nobody wants to know this, but I'm interested, so it was one of those things where like I was just nerding out. And then when I saw what ChatGPT could do, and actually it was a little bit before that, it was seeing some of the image generation software really got me intrigued. And that's when I started to kind of take it more seriously and say, like, I think I want to put together a book on this topic. So that's the journey. it's been a long process. Yeah, I think about the planning, the interviewing, the researching was kind of years in the making, and then the actual writing was start to finish close to a year. I contrast that to like when AJ and I wrote Empower, the two of us, we just had so much to say automatically on that but from starting it to creating the images, this is not counting editing, we probably wrote Empower in about a month, right? So just a huge difference in the amount of time. I don't think I'd ever written a book so methodically and slowly as I did with the AI roadmap.
That's so interesting
Yeah.
because it was like kind of like an arms race, right? Who was going to get their books out first? Yours is out fairly quickly in the grand scheme of things to have put so much thought into it.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. Like the part that was bizarre is, I mean, and it's not bad, but there's so many AI books out and
Yeah.
so many that came out quickly. And like I know you and I talked about this separately via email. The beautiful thing about being in education is I don't think we view it as a competition,
No.
and so that's to me like the more books, the better.
Yeah.
It's different than having blogs or podcasts. Like you're going to get multiple lenses and perspectives.
And so, two questions about it. Number one, I want to know about how you used AI to write that book and if you used it. That's question one.
Yeah. Okay.
And question two, you were talking about the how it's not a competition. So it's funny. So one of my book endorsers is Carl Hooker, who was on last episode, and he's coming out with an AI book. So he reached out to me and he's like, Alana, I just need to tell you before you find out from someone else, I just accepted an offer to write a book on artificial intelligence. And he was really nervous to tell me. And he's like, but don't worry, I'm going to reference your book. I'm like, Carl, I don't care. Like, and then I asked him, like, what's your book about? How can I help you? I'm happy to help. And everyone's lens is a bit different. Like mine actually isn't technical at all, really. It's more about my vision for the future of what education looks like in a world with AI, but it's not about the AI, where his book is going to be the terms you need to know and the history of AI. My book doesn't talk about any of that. So if someone's interested in the topic, they can read all of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm with you. And I feel like there's great books that are technical. There's great books that are big picture books. There's books that really help people in a more narrow focus of, say, ChatGPT. And then there's broader books that are about AI in general. And um, I think you and I both chose to go the more big picture route, right? Like my book is similar in the fact that there are no like how to do blank with AI. Like that's not what my book is, right? It's a roadmap and it's focused on human-centered learning. Um, to answer your question about how I use AI, I think like you have to pull back for a little bit and just think, what do we mean by AI, right? So obviously, as you write anything, if you're using spell check, if you're using autocorrect, if you're using predictive technologies as you write, you're using AI, right? If you're using a search engine, you're using AI. So, I mean, every portion of a writing process to begin with, pre-generative AI, had AI. Like, did you use Grammarly to get suggestions? Yep, that's AI.
Yeah.
But more particularly, if you think about generative AI, what I found is I, for the most part, wrote most of the book myself, right? Especially because I'm going to write stories, I'm going to do things like that. I did a couple times reference podcast interviews that I did, and that was really helpful to get, in my case, using ChatGPT 4 to look at the transcript, summarize it for me, right? Asking it, can you pick out a couple of quotes that work best? Just like treating it like it's a second author, not author, but
your AJ Giuliani. It was your AJ Giuliani.
Yeah, and just a second person there. A few times I used it to, when I'm coming up with lists, I would come up with a list on my own. I would have it come up with a list. I would then add a couple items to my own list and then rework it in my own words. I personally love it for like almost like just a summarization tool. Give me a definition or a quick explanation of blank, and then you take it and you rework it. I think that's how I used it. I use certain things like I did all the sketches myself, but there were times where I was like, I'm going to use Midjourney to come up with a concept that I then turn around and hand sketch, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so it's a weird thing, but you're like, I still love the act of drawing things by hand. In fact, I don't even like use an iPad or anything. Like I draw with like, I just have a bunch of different pens and pencils.
Wow.
And then I scan it, right? And that's my style. I just love, I'm a doodler, but I love the fact that I can use generative AI to come up with concepts of what to draw and then do it myself.
So now that I know that you love handwriting, a lot of your slides that you use it looks like it's handwriting. Is it actually your handwriting or is it a font that's sort of?
Oh no, yeah. So the actual font is a font that I purchased because my actual handwriting is so bad that it's illegible. In fact, like when I was a kid, the two subjects that I blew off where I was like, computers will replace this were spelling and handwriting, right? And then I ended up in like literally the only profession left where handwriting and spelling matter. I'm like, you're writing something on the board and you're like, oh man, I wish like I'm in the only job left where that ever matters.
It's so funny. I'm not a good speller, and it's like ironic that I wrote a book. I like really thank goodness for spell check. And auto typing when you're typing and it pops up.
Yeah.
I would look very unintelligent if it was not for AI. But that's actually, I posed this question in my book and it was not going to ask it to you, but this is a good question, I think. So one of my questions is, so, now that we've established you and I both took transcripts, that's how I did my case studies with my interviews. I took transcripts, and a lot of my book I did with dictation with my voice. So like maybe essentially, hypothetically, you don't need to be able to read and write in the traditional sense of reading and writing. So what do you think will define an educated human in 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it will come down to the medium itself changes the way we write, right? We know that like as we went from a print culture to a telegraph, sentences became shorter,
Right.
less complex. And then as we went to a broadcast culture with TV and audio, it became much more casual and even shorter. So probably my guess is in terms of writing, I'll just say that
Yeah.
it will be reshaped to be a AI. And I think like I wouldn't try to make that prediction of what it'll look like, but I will say, and this is what I bring up in the book, is that where like the biggest thing given that reality is that students will need to develop their own unique voice, right? Because you can automate the creation of a blanket, but people will still care more about that hand created, crocheted or knitted blanket, right? I can buy Oreos, they're awesome. They're nothing like homemade cookies, right? So in the end, there's that. And so I think the big thing broadly, we as humans will have to become really good at what AI can't do, whatever it may be. It cannot truly empathize. It cannot truly understand context. It cannot, there's these critical human skills, and we're going to have to be different at the things that it can do. So if we write, we have to write in a way where we can take sort of the vanilla of AI and make it our own. And like one of my favorite examples from the chess world is an AI will always beat a human in chess. But if you combine an AI with a human, that combination nearly always beats the AI alone. And it's because the human can sort of think above the algorithm and has that ability to think divergently. I mean, even if you think that AI is being creative, and it is, it's not thinking divergently in terms of what it's been trained via neural networks to do, because ultimately it's synthesizing. And so what the human can do is move away from the patterns and come up with an alternative route that then beats the AI. And I think that's the type of thinking that we're going to have to engage in.
And so my next episode, and you're going to see what your job is going to be in a minute, but my next episode is actually featuring Vicki Davis, and it's about human intelligence and artificial intelligence and the power of combining them. So it's a nice segue because The next slide, actually. So I started this new thing for season 2. We're launching season 2 right now, in case you didn't know. The last guest was Carl Hooker. So he had to create a prompt for you as the new guest. So you're going to have to create one for Vicky Davis. So start thinking of it, because you're going to have to give me one by the end. But your prompt from Carl Hooker is, you've written several books, as have I. What motivates you to write and publish a book?
I think deep down inside, I have to write. Like, that's my biggest motivator. I write blog posts, I make sketch videos. Who I am is a writer. 90% of what I write doesn't get shared. But I would just start with, like, I love to write. It's how I make sense out of ideas. It's how I make meaning. And so I would just start with, like, that is my main motivation to write in general. I love the act of creating. Why I write books and why I write the different books that I have to sort of take away that lens. Like, that's writing for fun is my jam. And then I have to say, for a book, I'm really thinking in particular of, I want something that will be useful to someone. And useful can be inspirational, it can be fun, it can be entertaining, it can be practical, but I want it to be something that's worth their time. And, when I think about, like, when I wrote Empowered at a Distance, that was super practical. It was focused on, like, look, we're doing distance learning. Let's think about that. When it was Empower, it was about a paradigm shift of, like, what does it really mean to be student-centered? And so in both cases, I think that's where you kind of have to take your, like, love of doing something, writing, and then transfer it into this second zone of actually thinking about who your audience is and what they would want, and making it worth their time.
Have you always been a writer, even as a young student?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty, I guess, pretty common. A lot of people, so I have dyscalculia, which means I struggle with dates, numbers, computational fluency, things like that in math. I actually do quantitative research and I love it, but a lot of people, if you have dyscalculia and you don't have dyslexia, which I don't, you end up leaning heavily into reading and writing as a, like, almost compensation. So probably somewhere around 4th grade, 5th grade, I really found a groove in terms of writing. I would write, like, little, comic books and things like that. And so, yeah, I think it's always
been a maker your whole life.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've always loved it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
I really love this. So there's authentic learning and there's changing the world. And what you explore is the intersection of those two things. So can you tell us a bit about that intersection?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I got into ed tech, not because I loved tech, but because to do the connective and creative work that I wanted my students to do with projects, it required technology, right? And this is back in the day. And we got these old computers that we ran on Linux. And I did nerd out a little bit on the tech at that point, but it was more focused on, how do I get kids blogging, podcasting, doing video creation? Smartphones came out and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Now it's easier to connect to the world. It's easier to create. So I've always been focused on, what does authentic learning mean in the midst of a changing world? And that changing world is technology, but it's also globalization. It's a pandemic. It's the notion that students will have to be adaptable. And so I just love nerding out on this overlap. It's funny because I'm, like, at the university, I'm in the ed tech area and everything, but I don't think that people who follow me would necessarily, like, lump me into a tech person, right? Like you mentioned.
No, yeah.
Vicky Davis, tech, right? Carl Hooker,
Right.
tech, Matt Miller, some of the people that you mentioned. And so even though I love tech, like, I'm not necessarily a tech tools person. I love exploring, what does it mean to do project-based learning and inquiry-based learning, and to empower students and just do authentic learning in a world that's constantly changing. And so I think AI is a part of that.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's why I coined the generative age, an era of
It's such a great title, by the way. I love that title.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I love how I made the AI pop out of the word generative
Oh,
too.
that's
That was a
okay.
fun, yeah, that came later. So it's been evolving over time.
Uh, I
But
saw
yeah,
that book cover, and because I love design, and so I saw that book cover and I was like, that is a great book cover. Like that's really nice.
oh, you should see all the iterations I went through to get to that point.
So you have a matching, that's cool, a matching mug too. Does
Oh,
that
thank you, Jimmy Casas. He sent it to me.
That's
Thank you.
so cool.
The light bulb is made with Midjourney.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and one of the chapters in my book was called A Universe Unveiled. So if you
Oh,
look closely, there's like a galaxy inside of the light
I can
bulb.
see that. That's very cool.
So it's like the like light bulb minute that like you use that light bulb in a lot of your drawings, you know what
Yeah,
that
yeah.
symbolizes. But then there's like the galaxy of possibilities inside.
Oh, I love it. Very cool.
So I pulled some of your topics from that website that you mentioned because it's a new era. Like you said, the rules have changed and students will need to rewrite the rules. That's something that you wrote about. Put some things that resonated with me. If you want to talk about one or all or none, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that question, how do you hope that we'll respond to the AI revolution? I mentioned in the video that you referenced, there's sort of two dead ends, right? That we want to avoid the techno-futurism where you say, let's make everything AI, and you can lose your humanity in that. And I don't think that that's what you want, right? Just because tech can do something doesn't mean a human shouldn't do it, right? Sometimes we just do things that technology does, and we do it because it's fun, or we do it because it leads to deeper learning, or whatever it may be. And then the other one is the lock it and block it approach, where schools just say, we're going to ban it, we're going to find it, we're going to look for it, and I think that is always a cat and mouse game that you lose, but also you lose out on the chance for students to learn how to use it wisely and to think about it ethically. And so for me, like the third route really is this idea of the overlap on the human and the tech, right? It's to be human centered,
You
but
called it the vintage innovation. Is that
vintage innovation approach. Yeah. So it's really saying like, what does it mean to use lo-fi and high tech? What does it mean to have human skills but embrace the tech? What does it mean to be, human centered, human forward, but use the tools wisely? And the maze part comes from this idea, and we actually reference this in our book Empower. This concept that for years we were taught a formula: you work hard at school, graduate from university, climb the corporate ladder. With the disruption of technology, our students are not going to inhabit a world that is a ladder. It's going to be a maze. So if the maze has become a ladder, what does that mean? What will they need? And so that's the whole focus. And I think that's something that you and I both have really focused on, is what are those human skills that they'll need?
Yeah. Well, that leads me right into the thing I had for you about Vicki Davis. So human intelligence, artificial intelligence. What is the prompt you have for Vicki Davis on human and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, let me think about this for a second. Sorry.
It's okay. You could think. We're going to go into the updates section. I tried to connect them to you, the updates and the resources. So we have not filmed an episode since Live at ISTE in June, and a lot has happened since June. So I tried to pick the highlights for the listeners because I didn't want to give them a long laundry list. So for those of you that have not heard of live episodes since June, OpenAI pulled their detection tool due to a low rate of accuracy. And if you've been listening to me, you know that I don't like using it as like a gotcha moment. I'm actually having Matt Miller on to talk about, I call it his shades of gray. He doesn't call it that, but his scale, and it's like great. So I call it shades of gray. So
I'm sorry. I went straight to the book and the movie. So like that's a totally he probably doesn't want that to be the term.
yeah, he probably doesn't. So if you've been listening to me, you know that my whole thing is if you are assessing the end product, then you could say gotcha, but what you really need to be doing is focusing on the learning process over the end product. So AI hold their AI detection tool, but if you are redesigning your learning and your assessments to focus on that learning process, then this shouldn't essentially matter, because if you're writing an essay and you're checking in with the student and you're watching the essay progress, then the end product shouldn't necessarily matter if you run it through an AI detector. And I thought that this was great to tie into you because your whole book on like empowering students, and you have a lot on project-based learning and design thinking. So I think if someone follows you and your ideas resonate with someone and they're actually doing all the things that you're putting out, they should not be worried about this. So I just wanted your opinion about how you felt about AI detection tools.
Yeah, so I think part of it is if you are watching the process, then it becomes very hard for someone to just cheat with AI, right? So I have, in my book, a whole section that's focused on how you would use AI ethically and wisely and transparently in every part of the writing process and the different models that you would approach it with, right? Or there's a chapter that focuses just on project-based learning. Like, where do we use it in project management, things like that. And I think the gotcha element misses the potential, the powerful potential of using it for creative work, for project-based learning, but also for answering questions and building prior knowledge, for inquiry, for designing your own scaffolds. You talk about empowering students, teaching students how to find their own scaffolds so they can access the learning. That's powerful. So when it comes to this idea of AI detection, my concern is it's almost always punitive. And it's almost always a focus on surveillance and punishment. And I think that true accountability is almost always about trust and transparency, not surveillance and punishment. And so what does it mean to begin with trust and transparency? First of all, I'm going to trust you, but trust alone still makes it too tempting. So there has to be transparency. And transparency involves watching, just asking students to say, like, show me what you're doing right now. Just show your work. Just show your process. And like you said, if we focus on the process over the product, it becomes something where we don't even have to be asking, do we run this through a detection tool?
Right.
No need for it, right?
Right.
And the numbers are, this is, like I said, dyscalculia, so bear with me. But if I have 100 students, I'm going to simplify it. And I'm teaching high school English, and I'm using a tool that has a 96% accuracy rate. That means 4 people potentially are either being falsely accused or getting away with it. And that's not okay. And then when you think about the number of essays that are written, it then, over hundreds of essays over the course of a semester, you're realizing you might have, 20 students falsely accused. And that becomes really scary.
Yeah, I agree. Next update.
Uh-huh.
So ChatGPT released custom instructions. So for those of you that don't know about it, if you click on the 3 dots on the bottom of ChatGPT and you go to custom instructions, you could say, what would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide better responses? So for example, you can say that you are a 3rd grade teacher, so you no longer have to tell it every single time you're a 3rd grade teacher. And you can say, how would you like it to respond to you? So for someone like me, and probably you, John, I have multiple personalities. So I haven't really been using it as much as I should, because I can't be, I'm a podcaster interviewing John Spencer about blah, blah, blah. Or, I'm a director of technology, and I just have so many hats, but I haven't really pushed this to its full potential yet. But I was curious if you have.
Yeah, I tried it and I didn't like it because I gave it custom instructions. I'm a professor and I make content and whatever. And it like immediately gave me everything super formal that just wasn't the way I am. So I actually erased it and undid it and changed the settings. And yeah, the same thing. So it's like, if I'm going to ChatGPT in one moment and I'm wanting an idea connected to a blog post, and then another time it's something relating to a lesson that I'm designing, and then another time it's like, I just want you to be chopped for me, and I'm going to give you random items in my refrigerator so I can make a dinner for 3 teenagers. I'm in different domains, right? And so I found the same thing. I had a really hard time with that. And I'll also say, like, one of the things that I struggle with a little bit on the custom instructions is where I think AI probably went wrong in earlier versions of AI are the downside of filtering based on relevance is part of what created filter bubbles and echo chambers and things like that. And the notion of AI changing to meet you and who you are is on one hand good, but I worry about what is the downside of that, you know?
That was a question I'm not sure the answer. Okay, next update. So this one's a bit technical, but I'm just going to take the technical parts out of it. So there is a GPU shortage. So a GPU is a graphic processing unit. And the main company that makes them is NVIDIA. So what are they and why are they important? You need them to build large language models, and you need a lot of them. There were 10,000 of them used to create ChatGPT in 2020. There's probably more now. And because there's a shortage, there's not enough to go around. So this is definitely going to slow down the pace of AI development. And this past summer, I was in Amsterdam with an AI researcher for Microsoft. He's leading a team that's building a GPT for weather, which I think is pretty cool. And I got to learn a lot about the technical side of it. And he was saying that the team might split into two different parts of the project. And he was really concerned because he had an allocation of GPUs coming to his project. And do the GPUs get split between the teams, or do the GPUs stay with the project? And he was highly concerned about this because it would have impacted his progress with this project of building the GPT for weather. Because there's only a certain supply of them, how are they allotted? So does NVIDIA get to choose where they go? Do they go to a big company like a Microsoft, or do they go to a startup? And then I'm going to tie this to you and what you do and the idea of being a maker and encouraging and empowering students to create. If you don't have access to the tools you need to create, there's a really big slowdown of new innovative ideas that can come out. So what do you think about that? Not the technology part, but the progression and innovation and new up and coming startups.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really valid concern, and it points to everything from access to money, to access to the technology, to access to the knowledge. And it's a reminder of why we need to pay close attention to the broader systemic realities rather than just, oh, cool, there's a new tool, right? Because those are all real valid concerns. One of the things that I'm concerned about with generative AI in terms of processing is, what is the environmental impact of all of this? And on one hand, I get super excited about the ways that AI is improving supply chains and just some of the really cool uses of AI with, say, drone deliveries to reduce the carbon emissions of the way we get supplies, right? The way we get items. On the other hand, it takes an awful lot of energy to fuel generative AI. So I start thinking, what are the ways that this reality will force innovation in terms of the models themselves, so that the creation of generative AI, the processing of it, ends up being forced to be more efficient and therefore more eco-friendly. You know what I mean? So I look at it from a system standpoint and go, obviously that's a really big concern and we need to be paying close attention, but often constraints lead to huge innovations.
I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah, we don't know.
I'm just a professor. I'm just a teacher, in a good way. Like I'm not a techie.
Yeah, but you do have that creative mindset to think about being a maker and an innovator. And a lot, like some people in this world are just very technical and logical and not thinking big picture outside the box. So I appreciate your insights. Then these are just a list of resources. Microsoft's AI, their Bing chat, is available for enterprise. So it's free for all staff. They're not saying students, they're saying staff. I just want to be specific about that for data privacy concerns. And they say that this includes commercial data protection. Again, they're saying this for staff and not for students. But you must enable this in your admin console. So I put in a ticket with my systems team to have this enabled. So you might want to reach out to your school or district and ask them to enable this for you as well. And you have access to the enterprise one for free. And then Code.org, ETS, ISTE, and Khan Academy teamed up to create AI 101 for Teachers, which are a free foundational online learning series. You could subscribe to receive updates. So they did just post something maybe last week. So if you go to that website and you subscribe to it every time they release a new one, you can check it out in their videos. So I can listen to them like I'm listening to a podcast in my car. And then the other most recent update, OpenAI last week released a teaching guide for teaching with AI, and it includes suggested prompts, explanations of how it works, and the limitations. And we also address all of that here on the show as well. But it's a quick read if anyone's interested in that. And if you have anything to add or any other resources, you can always just chime in.
Don't forget to talk about your workshops that start tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mary Beth. So I'm going to be hosting the Generative Age workshops through NiceGate. So once a month, there'll be Generative Age workshops. So you could check it out at the NiceGate website, nicegate.org. Do you want to share a couple of your favorite AI tools and why you love to use them?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm kind of being boring here, but I really do enjoy ChatGPT just for its functionality. Like I've just been impressed by it. And I personally love moving back and forth between 3 and 4 and sort of knowing what 3 does well and what 4 does well. And
yeah,
what
do you think the differences are? Because I go back and forth too. What do you think the main differences are?
I feel like for many tasks, 3 is faster and actually better. 3 feels like it gives you what you ask for, and it does a really good job, and it does it quickly. 4, on the other hand, sometimes just answers, like the answers just aren't at all what I wanted. Like it's like, well, you gave me something cool, but not what I was asking for.
Yeah.
On the other hand, its ability to like, I guess, sort of learn where you're like, hey, no, that's actually not what I wanted. Can you do this instead? And then it does that better. Or the way it will sometimes give you something that surprises you in a good way. And you're like, well, that's not what so I gave the example of recipes. Like I absolutely use ChatGPT for recipes. Like that's something. Or like I love using it as a tool for, creating sentence stems and frames and things like that for differentiating instruction in the lessons I teach, right? Former ELL teacher, I want to model making sure I have front-loaded vocabulary and sentence stems and all that. So it does such a great job with that. And then, ChatGPT 3, on the other hand, will do an amazing job with something like taking a syllabus or a calendar and breaking it down into step-by-step doable direction. So when I have someone with ADHD or lower executive function, I can model for them in an office hours. Like, here's how we use this tool to take your 7 courses that you're taking. Some are 1 credit, some are 3. They're starting all at different times. You're overwhelmed, and make up a semester-long plan. And it's been a game changer. When you do the same thing with 4, it doesn't do as good of a job. So do you see what I mean? I'm curious because you've used both. Like, what would you say is the difference?
I just think sometimes I just need a quick answer. And when I just need a quick answer, I use 3.5 because it's so much quicker. And it's just like you said, it gives you exactly what you needed. When I need ideas, I'll do both because I do like to see the differences in the ideas. But have you ever just like thrown it in like Bing or Bard or something as well, just to compare it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think?
So I love Bing, and like someone brought up that Bing is based on ChatGPT 4 and connects to the internet. Yes. So I was going to say, I often ping back and forth between 3 and 4 just because I want to stay on the same tab. But that would actually be, you asked for 2 tools. Like I love what Bing has become. And mostly because of the up-to-date data that it has and the, for lack of a better term, creativity of it. I've really enjoyed what Bing has to offer.
And what about like, because I know you're so into sketching and images. Do you use it at all for images, or do you maybe there's an AI that could take all your images and make those videos more quickly for you? Have you
Yeah.
explored any of
I
that?
mean, I'm hoping, like, so one of the things I would love, I can't wait until AI video editing gets really good at jump cuts. Like, it's already getting better, but that to me, when I record myself in front of a camera, it's actually like the talking head type stuff that I hate to edit. So something like that would be really cool. In terms of generating sketches, I like doing that myself, but like making the animations, if it can animate things for me and I can take the sketch and say, animate this, make it move, make it do this, make it that, that would be really, really cool. And then integrate that into whatever video program I'm using. So that would be super cool. I would love if that happened. I like it for inspiration. Like I mentioned, I use Midjourney a lot for things like that. And then I sketch it myself. I'm doing a project with my son. I've got a dog hat on it. I don't know if you can see it. So we're doing this thing called, yeah. So we're doing this thing called Positive Apparel. It's spelled like PAWS. I love dogs. And this is the logo. And it was interesting. Like I'm sketching things out and everything. But for some t-shirt designs, for some things, I'll probably use visual AI tools because they'll just design something in a style that I couldn't do myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then I would take that and make it my own. I would add things, I would edit things. I love using Illustrator. I love using Photoshop. So I could see myself, I'm treating it as an inspiration tool, visual AI, but I could see myself really getting into using it as a tool for things like that.
Does anyone have any last questions for John while he's on here? Type them in the chat if anyone has a question. We got a lot of compliments here. Great discussion. Thank you. Incredible discussion. You are wise beyond your years, John. Wise beyond your years.
Hey, Alana, can I speak in a question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, John, just talk briefly. When you were growing up, what did you want to be? Where did you see yourself?
Oh, I think
I'm quite sure you didn't say, I'm going to be an author on artificial intelligence and maker, because I'm quite sure maker wasn't even an actual term then.
No.
We're making, but not the mainstream. So
Yeah.
tell us, just give me a little bit of insight into that, because this was a fascinating.
So yeah, so what I wanted so badly to do, like, was I was obsessed with old vintage baseball stadiums. And this was an era where all the stadiums were like dull, concrete, awful, multi-purpose stadiums. So I was like, someday we're going to have these stadiums that are going to bring back the like classic vintage, which became a reality later with like Camden Yards. I remember when that happened, and then all these newer stadiums. So my dream when I was a kid was, I was like, I am going to be a baseball stadium designer, which obviously did not happen, but that was my goal. The second one though was author. Like I mentioned author. I was like,
Wow.
if I can't be that, but I thought it would be fiction.
Now that you say that, I was actually at dinner on Saturday night with a former coworker and his 19-year-old daughter, and she's writing a novel right now. A 19-year-old's writing a fiction novel, and she was saying that she can't believe I wrote a nonfiction, and that was so scary to her to think about nonfiction, but it was not scary for her to think about a fiction novel. So I think they're two totally different writing styles. Have you ever thought about writing a fiction novel?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have. Like, I co-wrote with my wife for our kids. We did like this book called Wendell the World's Worst Wizard, which was like a decade ago, pre-launch, before the book launch. I've written a lot of fiction. Like I actually, in my AI roadmap book, have a chapter that's just a short story.
Oh,
So
wow.
I love writing short stories. I love writing novels. I just don't share those because I don't think I have the confidence necessarily. Like I don't think it's what I've had has been good enough to be shareable. Does that make sense?
But I get that, but I'm just going to say that I was going to start a podcast during the pandemic, and Chris Nessie was really coaching me through it. And I'm like, I don't think what I have to say is good enough. And I just didn't believe in myself. The two biggest people that got me to where I am today, and they both say, you didn't need us to do it, you had it in you all along, was Carl Hooker and AJ Giuliani. Because I do think that sometimes you need someone to tell you to go for it. Your work is good enough. I wouldn't have had this podcast. So think about that. Like your fiction work maybe is a lot better than you think it is, and just really scary to put yourself out there in a new kind of way and feel like maybe people are judging you or thinking about you differently. But that could be like life-changing for someone who reads it, and maybe a lot more people will enjoy it. And you're depriving people of something so great. Yeah. So maybe.
I mean, I will say, like, when the pandemic came out, I created a really short children's book. And I mean, like, probably 15,000 words. And I audio recorded it and released it like a new chapter every day. And that was a blast to get like a little bit of that affirmation of like, hey, no, this is good. So I think I'll probably at some point lean into that a little more. I do love to write.
You have a following. You might not realize it. You have a fan club. And I think that your fans will adore everything you put out there. So maybe stop overthinking it, and just go for it.
Thank you. Well, I'll share one more piece of fiction. Like a couple years ago, I wrote something called Miss B Saves Christmas. And the whole premise, this is real silly, is that there's a retired teacher who goes to the library and thinks that she's like her best friend is a librarian, and thinks it's like a scavenger hunt and a joke. And then it turns out being a portal that leads to the North Pole.
Oh, wow.
And she can't figure out why she's there. And she wants to get home and everything. And the gist of it is, and it's like absolutely a short story. I'm talking like 1,000 words. And the whole gist of it is her secret skill is she's the only person in the North Pole that can read really bad first and second grade handwriting. Because like that's what she did for 30 years. She was like, I can decode all of this text. So it was real fun. And so I love doing that kind of stuff, but I've never done like I've never thought like, oh yeah, you know what? I should illustrate that and make it into a book.
But why not?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I'm sure a little kid would think that's really silly. And an adult would also a teacher would think that's like, they're like, oh my God, someone gets me. A lot of people might resonate with a lot of people, and you just didn't think about it.
Yeah, it's probably true. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I encourage you to put it out there in the world.
All right. Well, thanks.
Anything else you want to share before we close today?
No, I really appreciate it. And thanks for this time. Thanks for this conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. We just want to say thank you so much, John, for being on the show. If you don't follow John's work, tell us where to find your work.
Yeah, you can find me at spencerauthor.com. There's a specific link that I have there as well, where I have the AI for educators. I have sketch videos I've done on it. I have blog posts, podcasts.
A book.
I have an ebook. Yeah, an ebook. That you can download.
You have a real book too.
And I have a real book. Yes, I'm going to add it to that. I think I actually haven't added it to this. So I'm going to add it to this page as well. I just created a study guide for the book, and I'll be having that as a free download as well. So yeah, check me out at spencerauthor.com. I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is at SpencerEducation. And I'm also on Twitter at SpencerIdeas.
You mean X? You meant X.
I'm sorry, X.
Yeah. What's your X handle?
It's at Spencer Ideas.
And
yeah. Well, and I'll just say you'll see I love making videos as well. So
yeah, that video was really great. How will schools respond to the AI revolution? I just rewatched it right before we hopped on. It's a really great video for anyone that wants to check it out. It's linked in the resources here for you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone who joined us live. Thank you, for everyone who's listening. We're joined next time on October 23rd at 7 p.m. with Cool Cat teacher Vicki Davis talking about artificial intelligence and human intelligence. We're actually going to be live at NiceGate, recording hopefully 2 episodes live at NiceGate. And then after that, we'll have Matt Miller with the AI Shades of Gray, and we'll be having Ken Shelton talk about AI bias and discrimination. There's much, much more, but those are the ones we have lined up for you right now. You can join us live and participate in the back channel, or you could tune in on anywhere you find podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. If you have any ideas for guests, please let us know. And a big, big thank you to NiceGate for powering these podcasts.
Thank you, Alana. Great evening, John. Awesome. We need to bring you up to NiceGate sometime.
That'd be fun. That'd be fun.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Generative Age, powered by NiceGate. For a deeper dive, check out my new book titled, How'd You Guess? The Generative Age, now available on Amazon.
Our journey may pause here, but the conversation doesn't need to end.
Stay connected and informed by following me on social media at Alana Winnick and subscribing to my newsletter, all conveniently accessible on my website, alanawinnick.com.
Don't just listen, be a part of it. With your free NiceGate membership, you can join these live discussions, enroll in our free Generative Age NiceGate community, where you can share resources, ask questions, and collaborate with like-minded colleagues. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider leaving a review and telling a colleague or a friend.
We've got so much more in store, so be sure to join us next time for another exciting conversation. Until then, keep learning and keep growing in the Generative Age.